Thank you for tuning in to the Afternoon Pint Podcast. Our show will start right after these messages from our sponsors.
Hey, Matt. We're thinking of selling our home and finding a bigger place.
Oh, really? I thought you guys loved where you lived.
Oh, we do. Our family is just growing. With pets. A dog, a cat, 2 guinea pigs, a hamster.
And you're planning on getting more?
Maybe a goat or a crocodile.
Well, I have the person for you. Kimmy Najad is an experienced real estate agent who prides herself in finding the perfect home for her clients.
We're just browsing now. I'm not sure if we really need a realtor yet.
Yeah, no worries. Kimmy can help you with the comparative market analysis to help you determine the value of your home if you're planning on selling, or help you determine the going rate for the neighborhood you're moving into. She can also work at your pace.
Awesome. All right, I'll give her a shot. What's her phone number?
On Facebook, Kimmy Najad, Exit Realty Metro. Her phone number is 902-880-8429, and her email is kimia@exitmetro.ca.
902-880-8429. Awesome. Thanks.
This podcast was brought to you by Dan Lomas. That's LOMAS of lomasfinancial.ca.
Are you a small business owner who wants to keep more of your hard-earned profits and pay less taxes to the CRA? Do you want to plan for a comfortable and secure retirement? If your answer is yes, then you need to talk to Dan Lomas at Lomas Financial.
Dan Lomas is a financial advisor who has been helping successful entrepreneurs and business owners for over 2.5 decades. He utilizes customized solutions that can help you keep your earnings, dramatically reducing passive income tax.
Dan Lomas and his team will help you transition corporate wealth into personal wealth by utilizing customized executive pension plans. Dan will show you how to convert business wealth into personal wealth in a professional manner.
Don't let the CRA take more money than they deserve. Don't let your retirement dreams fade away. Contact Dan Lomas today and let him guide you on your path to financial success.
Visit Dan Lomas at lomasfinancial.ca or call him direct at 902-209-0855. That's 902-209-0855.
Cheers!
Cheers!
Welcome to the Afternoon Pint. I'm Mike Tobin.
I am Matt Conrad.
And who do we have with us today?
I am astronomer John Reed.
John Reed.
Wow. Round 2.
Round 2.
Welcome back. You get a second cheers for that. There you go. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
And we're at the Oxford Tap Room once again. I'm trying their summer, what is this, Matt? A summer...
Jazzler.
Jazzler? That's what they called it? Oh my gosh.
Jazzler.
Okay, well, it's pretty good. And
it's a Radler, 3% Radler.
3%, right? So it's it goes down pretty quick. And what do you got there?
I get their jalapeno ale.
I love that one.
It's, you know what? They used to do a jalapeno ale like back when they first started, and it was legitimately spicy, and I used to love it.
Yeah.
This one, for anyone who's concerned, for anyone who's concerned, like I don't like spicy. This is not spicy at all, but has a really great jalapeno flavor. Just the flavor. No heat.
Yeah. And what do you have there, John?
So I'm drinking a tall ship ale.
Yeah.
Classic
Halifax. That's
That
the classic, the staple Garrison. Yeah. It's good beer, too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, man, thank you so much for coming back to us. We wanted to start having guests come back, and we said really early on that we wanted to talk to you again. So I think our first conversation was quite fascinating. So we learned things.
I hope so.
Yeah, I went out and bought a second telescope. Since our first, honest to God, it's in the living room, right? So
he went from $20 to $20 million.
No,
I don't know where you got it from. This podcast is doing really well.
There you go.
$20 to $25 more like it, but still, yeah. So we got the kind of wider scope thing that you recommended.
So you got a higher aperture.
Yeah,
see more detail. Yeah.
And we've used it once. Yeah,
it's been cloudy though.
Yeah.
It's been cloudy. We were lucky. Did you guys see the eclipse on April 8th?
He used it on the eclipse.
Used it on the eclipse. Well,
he did tell us not to do that in the first episode. No, I didn't use it on the eclipse. I did. We all had the eclipse glasses because the kids all got them in school. We all.
So did you go? Did you see the partial eclipse from Halifax?
Partial.
Yeah. Okay, so you saw partial. You didn't go to New Brunswick.
No.
Okay.
No. But we got like 93%. I think.
Yeah. So in terms of the awesomeness, that's about a 1%. A 99% eclipse is a 1% awesomeness eclipse. That's what they say, and it's so true. So we get partial eclipses every year. So the next one is March. We had one on October 24th. We had a partial eclipse here in Halifax, and everyone came out to see it in Dalhousie. It was a little cloudy, but we were able to see it through the clouds. And the next partial eclipse,
How much partial though? Like,
is March. I don't know. It was 20-some%.
okay, so yeah,
It wasn't 99. So I was surprised with the folks in Halifax that they did see it get noticeably dimmer outside.
Oh yeah, no, it was.
Yeah,
clearly
definitely.
dimmer,
And I didn't expect Halifax to get as dim as I heard it did.
Yeah, it darkened up a bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in Prospect. It got darker.
It just felt like a sunset,
Yeah.
but not a full sunset, obviously.
Yeah, but the temperature dropped too. I found.
yeah, temp
Yeah.
drop. Birds were kind of going a little funny.
Yeah, they were. They were. Birds were going like
And so I was in Doketown, New Brunswick.
Okay.
And
you're right
I was
in the line,
using I had all this camera equipment set up, and I had all these experiments set up, and I was trying to change my camera from video to picture, and I had to turn the little dial. I couldn't do it.
Oh.
I couldn't see it. It was too dark. To see any of the settings on the camera. And then people were screaming and howling like wolves. And it was just a very interesting experience.
Now, did you go with your family or just with folks from?
So I got invited to Storytown Cottages, and they were having a private event
Cool.
For photographers and
What's Storytown Cottages?
Storytown Cottages in Doketown. So it's just some cottages on the river in central New Brunswick. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful.
Do they read you stories to go to sleep or something?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Totally.
amazing.
No, I didn't stay there. I was in Miramichi the night before. Remember, there was a snowstorm the day before up north, and so when I was in Miramichi, getting there, we had
There was a snowstorm the day before the eclipse in
yeah,
Miramichi? Oh my gosh.
it was nuts. And so they got I think it was 3 feet of snow.
Wow.
And I didn't realize. So we were listening to podcasts on the way up that we're like, this is great. There's no traffic. It's because they were telling people to stay off the roads.
Oh.
And we got there, and then the next day during the eclipse, the sun came out. And it was a beautiful day. And then, of course, the sun went away for the eclipse, and it was dark. And then it came back. Fortunately.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's probably a good thing.
It's a good thing.
Yeah. No sun would equal pretty bad time for the rest of us, kind of thing.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was Richard Zarowski was there at this
Was he?
event. Richard Zarowski. And
Amazing.
he was so excited. He was just like running around and being like, did you see that? Did you see that? Did you see that? And so that was my experience meeting Richard Zarowski, who I only know from Wonder Why.
Wonder
as a
Why,
kid.
yeah. I've met him a couple times. I mean, he was a counselor, and so he's running actually again for council again.
Here? Yeah.
Yeah, he was counselor for one term.
Okay.
I think he should stick to science, not politics, personally. But well, I mean, he's a very smart man, and I really, really enjoyed listening to him when he was on the radio talking about science.
Yeah.
I don't like him in politics.
That's funny.
Yeah, he just it's
I guess we're not getting him on the show now. Thanks, man.
think-
Once again, his opinion. Yeah.
he's more than welcome to come on here and tell me why I'm wrong, because I'm sure that's what he would do.
No, there were lots of interesting people there. So we also had Tim Doucette, the blind astronomer. We had
Sorry, the blind astronomer.
the blind astronomer.
That sounds.
He has a condition where he had his lenses in his eyes removed as a child. So he basically is focused at an infinity. So he's legally blind. He has to wear blackout sunglasses during the day.
Yeah.
But at night, his eyes are focused on infinity. So he can see the Milky Way. And he actually sees it better than anyone with regular vision. And so
He's not just tripping, like he's seeing this for real.
so
as far
he's
as
got a giant observatory in Yarmouth.
Yeah.
And then he invites similar people from around the world that have his condition to go and learn to stargaze.
That's
No
brilliant.
way.
So that's Tim Doucette.
Cool.
And so you can he's got a cabin and he's got domes down there. It's a whole AstroTourism experience.
We gotta go on a trip to Yarmouth.
That sounds like a trip.
No,
indeed.
it's great. And so he's got a big telescope. I think he's got a 14-inch telescope in a dome that's electronic.
Wow.
And everything. And he'll show you around. It's got sky circles for star tours and the whole bit. It's great. And he's got kayaks and stuff for during the day at the cottages.
Super cool.
Yeah. Who else was there?
cool.
Dave Chapman was there. So Dave Chapman is he worked at in the defense industry in Dartmouth at one of the government offices there as a career, but he's also insanely obsessed with lunar astronomy. So he's obsessed with the moon, and so he helped me write that book, 50 Things to See on the Moon.
Oh yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that won the Simon Newcomb Award in 2020. So he was instrumental in that.
Nice.
And then Jason Dane, famous photographer from Nova Scotia, he was there. And so there's a lot of the epic photos of the eclipse that you saw were taken from there in Doketown.
Cool.
That's really
Yeah.
cool.
Shout out to Doketown. That's pretty awesome.
And then it was put on by Stéphane Picard. And so he organized it, and he has an AstroTourism business where he connects people that are trying to get people excited about space.
AstroTourism.
Yeah.
That's kind of the future, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, there's a lot of aspects to it because for the everyman, you're probably not going to go to space within the next 30 years.
That's
But
fair.
you can sort of vicariously experience it through different experiences. Like you could go in an airplane that does zero gravity flight. So that's sort of a form of astrotourism or space tourism. You could do on what's called an analog mission where you go to Hawaii, for example. They have a dome, that you can pay money and sort of go and you can either play scientist or you can actually do science there. In these sort of, they're called analog simulations. And they're a lot of fun.
I saw an interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson. I probably talked about him last time. Big fan. So I was listening to him talk about how he feels that like space. He was calling it space tourism, but astrotourism is like the future, and how that is actually how a lot of funding could actually end up happening. Is obviously people who can pay. That's how it will start. It's happening now, right? With billionaires going up to zero gravity flights and all that stuff. But eventually, hopefully, it gets to a point where it's more feasible for people to go visit the moon or something like that. Like I'm going to go vacation on the moon or whatever, right?
Yeah. So you have the pioneers like Charles Lindbergh crossing the Atlantic for the first time, and now we have people like Jared Isaacman going to space and doing the first all-civilian spacewalk. And I think that's next month or later this month in a mission called Polaris Dawn. And so he's got a team of people, and they're all civilians, but they're two of them are SpaceX employees, and then they're going to go on probably a 3 or 4 day mission, extremely high altitude mission. So 3 times as high as the space station, and do spacewalks. Yeah, to test, and they're testing hardware, and they'll do lots of experiments. But that's privately funded, mission.
So, I mean, there must be some real fears associated with this too, with things going wrong.
I can think insurance liability is probably through the roof.
Yeah, but I mean, when you have a human mission, space shuttle aside, there's a lot of redundancy. So there's very little single point failure on the spacecraft itself. And you're talking about spacecraft these days. They're not like airplanes that go to space like the space shuttle was. You're talking about basically diving bells. And when if you want to come back to Earth, all you do is slow down in your orbit, and then you lose energy and intersect the atmosphere, and you've got a diving bell shaped, spacecraft that just naturally wants to come back into the atmosphere and slow down. And, so the risk is greatly reduced. And, on takeoff as well, which is the most dangerous part of the flight, you've got a launch abort system. So if anything happens during launch, you hit a button and your boosters drop off and you fly away from the exploding rocket behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When's the last time there have been fatalities in space, as far as you know?
Yeah. So the last fatality in space would have been Columbia. So I believe that was 2004.
Yeah.
And then before that, it would have been Challenger. And then before that, it was a Russian mission with that actually, they were coming back into the atmosphere, and someone had flipped a valve and had vented the oxygen out of the capsule.
Yeah. So just lit everything up.
No, so they were just dead within a few seconds. Yeah. If you lose pressure in the capsule. And
sorry. I was thinking like the oxygen, because I'm thinking entering the atmosphere, there's lots of heat. And I was thinking someone flipped the oxygen just because oxygen, it can ignite. And
they lost pressure. So they
lost the pressure. Okay.
And then the other death in the space program would have been Apollo 1, which was Gus Grissom and the other two guys, which was just a fire in the cockpit during a training exercise.
How, I guess in your opinion, how sustainable? Because I mean, it takes a lot of fuel to get something into space. How sustainable is that with us trying to go green and get off fossil fuels and all that stuff?
Yeah, fortunately, we're trying to move to a hydrogen economy. Is one way to think about it, right?
Yeah, okay. So I've heard about this.
And most rockets, I believe, a lot of them are kerosene, but which is basically jet fuel.
Yeah.
But a lot of the rockets are using hydrogen and oxygen.
Yeah,
and you can make that hydrogen with electrolysis, which is just splitting water into its components.
I was reading, watching a YouTube video about this recently, about how they were explaining when they fill them up with fuel, half of it is basically like liquid oxygen and liquid nitrogen or something, whatever it is. Yeah, and that's the fuel. And I was like, that's kind of interesting. So I guess we're not really running out of oxygen anytime soon. So, I don't know. Yeah, same probably for nitrogen, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, the other thing about the space industry right now, if you're worried about the environment, most of the science that we get about the environment comes from space.
I
Right,
think we need to do it.
So it's kind of an interesting, it's interesting where we get our knowledge. Like we wouldn't even known about environmental concerns if it weren't for, starting with Apollo 8 when, Anders, who just passed away a couple weeks ago, took that picture of Earth rising, on the other side of the moon. And that's kicked off that Earth Day movement that we still celebrate to today. And then, the hundreds and hundreds of satellites that do our Earth observation, that monitor our oceans and our farms to know, when the crops have moisture and et cetera, et cetera.
And the flat photograph helped establish that the Earth was flat.
Exactly.
You know what's crazy? I find it absolutely fascinating that the Earth seems to be flat, but like all the other planets are round.
What?
That's the weirdest thing.
It's very curious. Yeah.
It's so weird, eh?
Yeah, shadow of the flat earthers.
Yeah. They're a fun bunch.
Yeah.
So anyway, you kind of mentioned with this gentleman down in Yarmouth that he has an observatory. Like, you were last time we talked, which was actually at our beer kickoff.
Oh yeah, thanks for coming to that, John.
Yeah,
you came
Absolutely.
by. A few other people came by. Yeah,
that's a very interesting.
Made it a really fun night.
You know what? The funny thing is, you were a hit. We had a lot of people who were who I talked to afterwards. They were like, "We had so much fun at your event. It was really great. Like, seemed really funny." And I got to meet an astrophysicist. Like, what's up with this?
Well, it's funny. They get me going. talking about space.
Oh man, yeah. Andrew, my partner, knew who you were, and you spoke with my brother there. I mean, a lot of people. Yeah, so you were a celebrity.
Oh,
yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So sorry. So Matt was saying.
So I was saying, so but you were telling me that you actually are in the works of trying to get your own
AstroTourism Center in Halifax. Yeah, that's one of my dreams is for Halifax to have an AstroTourism Center. And
get some land like towards the East Coast.
Yeah. We talked about this last time. We've got 26 acres. The development agreements have been submitted. Not sure where they are in the process or how long it takes. And then we've also got the permits with the city for an observatory. And so when Dave Lane, the director emeritus at the observatory at St. Mary's, passed away, he had a fairly large observatory on his property that was robotic, just like the one at St. Mary's, and could be used by anyone in the world. And when he got sick, it went offline. And so we were able to get a grant for a student to help. And we were able to transfer the rights to that observatory or the ownership over to Stargaze, Nova Scotia. And we're going to move it to that location on Prospect Road near Peggy's Cove. And so we'll get that built back up again and get it back to its original capacity of being able to be used by anyone in the world to do some important science. Cool. And then on top of that, we're going to add some additional capabilities in what's called the Starfinder program, which is a foundation set up by Dave Lane's family. And what it'll enable is funding to train teachers to come and use the telescope, that one and the one at St. Mary's and some other programs as well, but to teach the 6th and 9th grade science teachers in Nova Scotia how to teach kids about astronomy. And they'll have this asset that they can have access to as well at Stargaze Nova Scotia under dark skies, where they can use this telescope in person.
Do public schools have any secondary courses for astronomy now? I don't think they do. So
it's in the curriculum. So it's in this. As far as I know, it's currently heavily in the 6th grade science curriculum. They do the solar system. And then my understanding is that the Starfinder program will help 9th grade science teachers. So the last year of middle school, they'll touch on space as well, because there's a lot to cover. And it's also one of the biggest industries, if you include telecommunications.
Yeah.
It's also one of the fastest growing industries as well. Now that launch costs, the cost to get stuff into space has come way down over the last few years. And so the amount of hardware that we can put in space and have it working for us to make our lives better is vastly accelerating.
Right.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So it's super excited to have an observatory at Stargaze, Nova Scotia there.
And you think that's going to happen? Like in the next 10 years, 5 years? Or do you have a kind of a goal in mind of when?
A timeline? So we were hoping to get the telescope moved over this month.
Oh, wow.
we can't open it as a business until the development agreement is approved. And I'm hoping within the year. And then the development agreement will include additional observatories that can hypothetically be rented out. And then there's a business model to go with that. And so that would be for amateur astronomers or families who want to go and just have a night under the stars and have access to telescopes.
I can't see anything but benefits. I mean, around that area, you have lots of cabins and lots of places to stay, you know. So if you want to go there in an evening, stay the night.
Well, and on top of that,
make an evening of it.
On the way to Peggy's Cove, like everyone and their dog goes up to Peggy's Cove in the summertime, right?
Yeah.
So it's a great spot for it. I mean, there's less light pollution.
It's very dark.
Yeah.
You step out of your car in the summer and you see the Milky Way.
Yeah. I that's where I live, right? I'm out in Prospect,
it's wonderful
right up there. So it's pretty awesome up there. And I mean, I know you said grade 6 to 9 or maybe more or whatever, but I can imagine, like, my wife teaches grade 3, so I can only imagine that, take a couple grade 3s out there, that they'd probably be pretty.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So
they can see.
And as soon as we've got that telescope there, if people want to contact me at learntostargaze.com, we've got a contact us page on the website, then I'll probably assign a grad student, or maybe myself will do it, and they can go out and do a tour with the telescope, have them look through the telescope.
Afternoon Point would love a tour. So
you can definitely have a tour.
Can we do stars and beers?
Beers into the stars.
That sounds like an absolutely wonderful event.
Yeah.
I think we should do that.
Yeah, and then you have to stay in the cabins, though. Don't want you driving home.
Okay.
On Prospect Road.
Yeah.
I'll just get my wife to pick us up.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
No, it sounds like a good time.
Volunteering her on.
So Matt, I was asking you before the show. I said, what do you want to talk to John about? You said.
I want to talk about.
I took notes. What was it?
So I want to ask you. I read this article recently that there was a theory that Jupiter may have been a dead star. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think it depends on your definition of star. And so if you think about what a star is, a star is when enough mass gets together, enough gravity gets together, that in its core, that pressure inside it starts fusing, in our sun's case, hydrogen into helium. So you have this process by which you have enough mass that it causes fusion to happen. So Jupiter is simply not that big. So
That's what this was kind of saying. But what they were saying is, like, it was like basically a doomed star. Like it in the dawn of time, it got into a battle with our sun star, and it basically lost the tug of war.
Sure, I mean that's one way to think about it. If you think about how we can observe solar systems being created, you use your telescopes. When we look at big clouds of dust in space, and you see other solar systems being created, you see new stars being born. Right. And so that gas is collapsing, and as it collapses, it rotates and it sort of spins itself into this disk. And then that gas collapses more and you get stars. And if there's heavy stuff, you get planets, and then out in the exterior, you get comets. And then, you wait enough time and you've got a solar system.
Yeah.
And that's why most solar systems actually have more than one sun.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, you can have,
and that's what that blaze star is that we were talking about earlier. And although I think, that's something I think you also saw in the news where, they're like, oh, blaze star is going to show up in the sky. That's a case where you've got two stars in the same system. You've got a big star and you've got a little star, and they're sharing gas between them.
Yeah.
And so that's all that is.
And it's I find that so fascinating. If you put your astrometeorologist hat on, when do you think that storm's going to end on Jupiter?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, as far as we know, it's been going on for 400 years.
350, 400 years.
Yeah, and maybe because of the size of Jupiter and the energy it has, maybe it'll almost never end.
Yeah.
So if anyone doesn't know, it's the red dot.
Yeah, the big red dot on Jupiter. And, because if we look at some of the other gas giants, and it maybe depends on their mass, like Neptune has one as well.
Yeah.
And you can see that it's got this sort of similar shaped storm. And then Saturn's a little different. Saturn seems to have this hexagon that forms at its poles, its hexagon shape. And that's sort of the natural pattern that flows out of its size and rotation.
I had a question for you too about, so in the Kuiper Belt, they've deemed the Ceres, which is like a dwarf planet. How did they, like, I find dwarf planet such a cop-out name. Because it's like, Is it
Sure.
a planet or is it not a planet? Just like shit or get off the pot type of thing, right? Like, and it's like stuck in the middle of this belt of rocks and meteors and whatever, right? Like, how's that thing even still like considered a planet, and how's it not completely banged up?
Or maybe I think it is pretty banged up.
I mean, imagine
You
it would
look at
be,
that thing.
but
Did you see The Expanse?
no.
Cirrus Station in The Expanse.
Okay.
Like it's anyway.
Yeah. I find that it's funny. Like we have this dwarf planet Pluto. Like Pluto was like, at one point a legit planet. We talked about this before. We demoted Pluto.
Pluto's pretty. I think Pluto got a promotion. A
promotion.
A binary planetary system there with Sharon. It's buddy.
Yeah.
You know. I mean, Pluto's pretty cool. And when you get there, you see this big, giant pink heart.
I think Pluto is cool, and that's why I think classing it in the same like category as Ceres is kind of lame. Ceres just looks like Ceres just looks like, to me, it just looks like a really, really big rock in the. I mean, I guess that's every planet, but you know what I mean. Like it looks like a meteor, like just floating in the middle of the Kuiper Belt type of thing. It doesn't really look.
Yeah, I think if I recall, though, Ceres in the asteroid belt. So Pluto takes about 15 years to get to, or I think New Horizons took about 9 years to get there. It was booking it, going really fast. You could probably get to Ceres in about a year.
Okay, yeah.
And so it's actually quite a bit closer. I think it's in the asteroid belt.
That's what it was saying. Yeah, it's in there.
Yeah,
Maybe that's right.
Pluto's in the Kuiper Belt.
Pluto's
Ceres
in the
asteroid
Kuiper
belt.
Belt. Yes, Ceres in the asteroid belt. So,
And then so Vesta would be the other sort of big body out there. They're also pretty small though. So Pluto and the Moon are more similar size.
Yeah.
Ceres and Vesta are like a lot smaller than the Moon. So there's a big size difference between those two as well. So
speaking of the Moon, I think I read something. Is it coming up in the next year? I was reading that there's 2029, I think is what it is. That there's supposed to be some sort of like asteroid that actually passes, like a significant one that passes between us and the Moon, and it's like, pretty. It's like doomsday.
maybe. It's pretty
reading
funny.
I
I
was reading
like
it to my wife on the weekend. She was like, "That's scary," and I'm like, they're tracking this stuff. They know what they're doing."
Well, hilariously, we had this big joke. So Johns Hopkins University was in charge of the DART mission. Remember that? And that's where they blew up that effectively blew up the asteroid there.
Yes.
And they had the meme with the dinosaur, the T-Rex, and he's like, "That's how it feels." And so, if there was
You guys are basically the movie Armageddon.
yeah, so if there was an asteroid, with greater than a 1 in 10,000 chance of intersecting the Earth within a decade, at this point, I think it would be pretty trivial to move it.
Yeah.
Because all you do is you have enough lead time. Because I think we track about 600,000 asteroids on radar.
Wow.
And then we know where they're going for the next 1,000 years or so, and where they'll be, just from doing math. And so if you did see one of those that got perturbed in such a way that it was going to intersect the Earth with a high probability, I think we'd just go and move it.
Yeah, I was actually reading about how they move like stuff, and it's quite fascinating. But I also read that they don't want to like jump on it too early because they could also kind of screw it up and
I mean,
have the trajectory.
It's the same thing with debris mitigation, which is happening, I feel like, about once a week now, where Space Force in the United States out of Vandenberg will call a satellite operator and be like, "Hey, there's less than a 1 in 10,000 chance that a piece of space debris is going to move your spacecraft. You need to move your spacecraft."
Right.
Well, and what happens though is they need to be very careful, because what if you move your spacecraft into a more dangerous situation?
Yes. Right.
So they're very careful about, you want to adjust the orbit of your spacecraft to that minimum requirement of less than 1 in 10,000 chance of conjunction between the spacecraft and a piece of space junk, so that you don't cause it to, because then you got to redo the math, and you might have a higher probability of conjunction with some other piece of junk.
And there's like a whole bunch of stuff up there. Like
So they were tracking
empty,
they were tracking 27,000 pieces last time I checked, and that's anything bigger than a deck of cards. And I mean that's big. That's a big deal right now, especially if you had a foreign power that like didn't want GPS anymore or didn't want spy satellites anymore.
You send some stuff up there to interfere.
Yeah, because hypothetically you could just eliminate the use of space entirely by just creating a debris field around the Earth intentionally. And so that's a big risk right now that I know at least the United States military is working on. How do you mitigate that if it happens? How do you clean it up? Should we clean up what's already there now? Should you have a policy in place? And my proposal was a 1 up, 1 down policy. And so if for every 180 kilograms you're putting into space, you need to take a piece of space junk down. And so 180 kilograms called an ESPA class satellite. They're like the size of a dishwasher. So for every one of those that you put in space, you need to have a little CubeSat that goes in bags and tags, a piece of space junk and pulls it down.
Could you just push it further out of orbit?
Yeah, sometimes you do that. It depends on how high you are. So anything below about 500 kilometers in altitude is gonna come down over the next few years anyway, and you could sort of pull stuff down a little quicker. If you're over 1,000 kilometers in altitude, usually it's better to just push it up higher into an orbit that's not used anymore.
What would be the problem with us just like treating the moon like our dumping ground?
The problem is just cost.
Yeah, just cost. But I mean, like, there's nothing there. Like, people get all bent out of shape. They're like, I see comments on Facebook and they're like, oh, we're doing enough damage to our own planet. Why do it? But I'm like, there's nothing on the moon. There's nothing. Like, it's...
Yeah.
Like, it would look cool if it had like a little garbage hat, like a little,
think it'd be
little pile of...
Man, you're making me picture just a big pile of tires on the moon just on fire or something.
It's like The Simpsons. It's just like burning internal burning.
And then we used all of the moon, and we had to go further.
You filled it up. And then you look at the night sky and the moon would just be a different color.
We got Mars. Yeah. We can get there. We can get there.
Gosh. Here we go.
So we were talking about, before you got here, another article that I read, and I just wanted your thoughts on it, and I'll get you to explain it too, but I was reading an article about... Oh, there you go, dogs.
It's a dog-friendly place at the Oxford.
Exactly.
So we get a puppy in there every now and then. He's just wanted to say hi.
Exactly. Dyson spheres. I heard that they've recently, I guess, kind of discovered that they could potentially be actually real, because they were kind of theoretical before, I believe.
I mean, I don't. So a Dyson. So a Dyson sphere.
Sorry, Matt. So go back. So Dyson sphere. Let's
we
people
can
that
explain what it is.
Yeah, explain what it is.
Do you want to explain what it is? You sound like you
no.
want
I
to.
don't want to explain what it is.
Yeah. So you have a star, and a star puts out just an incredible amount of energy.
Yeah.
And let's say you wanted a bunch of energy to maybe travel between the stars, and you need the entire energy of a star. And so what you would do effectively is maybe you mine the asteroid belt for all the iron, and you build a sphere around the entire star. You put, solar panels on the inside of it. And so you collect 100% of the energy coming out of a star. And it's a lot, like trillion times as much energy as like humans use. And then so effectively the idea is, okay, well, maybe if we're looking for aliens or something, you would look for Dyson spheres in space.
Right.
And look for these stars that have been blocked out by some sort of sphere. So, it'd almost look like if you were observing, you'd have a black hole, what looks like a black hole, but it's not, maybe. I don't know. Because it's been covered by basically a sphere of
gigantic
iron.
Black. Yeah.
And so I don't know. So Freeman Dyson, the author, really cool guy. I just read a book by him, which was really good, called The Scientist and the Rebel. And he basically goes through all the scientists in history, the ones that were really rebellious, and tells their story.
Yeah.
So
now, AI would need one of these things in order for it to really take over the Earth, right?
That's true. Yeah,
I think you could take over the Earth a lot more easily than having to build a Dyson sphere.
No. You know what? Actually, we had a conversation.
We had a guy on last week, Giles Crouch.
Yeah, he's going to be on, and he's kind of like a bit of a futurist, and he also, but he's a digital anthropologist.
Yeah,
and he talked about how he's not worried about AI because it would have to take all of the energy that the Earth can produce in order for it to get to the point where it's at the level of a human brain. It can never get as intelligent as the human brain.
Sometimes I feel like AI is smarter than me already.
I think it passed me a few years ago. Yeah.
You know what? It's not yet, because I as we were talking about this. So the Meta AI thing, we were talking about this. And I use it. Some people hate it, but I love it. I use it to create cool images. I have a picture on there of Thanos fighting Red Hulk and Green Hulk to show my son, and I get it if my son wants to read stories, and he's almost 3, and he says like, "Oh, I want to hear a story about." one that we were talking about. It's like, I want to hear a story about
You
Venom
can't. You
and
can't just
Carnage.
make up a story. You can't just make
I
up
do.
a story and entertain a 3-year-old.
I sure do. I do it all the time.
Yeah.
My wife is actually the one who said, like, hey, you know what? Because my wife can't, apparently. And she was like, hey, you know what I do is I just use the Meta AI and I just tell them what I want to hear. And I was like, oh,
But
that's
what
a
if
good
the
idea.
AI robot falls in love with your child and eventually tries to replace you as parents?
It can't experience
Black
love.
Mirror episode waiting to happen.
I
Buddy.
know. But it's
Although
like,
I think things happen really slow and then they happen fast, like in
Yeah.
terms of
No, that's
technological
very true.
change.
We're
And
in a
so
fast jump right now, I believe, with AI.
Here's me being a futurist, and I'm just coming up with this right now.
Yeah.
You've got humanoid robots. And they've never really worked. They're
No.
clumsy. You have Atlas and the Boston Dynamics one, the same companies that makes that dog. And you have Tesla bots, and then you have a bunch of ones in Japan. I think there's going to be an inflection point where we're actually going to see those in our daily lives.
Yeah.
And it's going to be
Agreed.
it's going to be like iPhone fast.
Yeah. I
And
agree.
then all of a sudden they're going to be everywhere. And then there'll be another inflection point where instead of like looking like the robots from iMovie with iRobot with Will Smith, they're going to look like people. And
Yes.
I think there's going to be a point where that is normal.
I think that I totally agree with that. There's I guess maybe some some solace that I take with Giles' theory of like the energy's not, because our brains are like, the energy, our brains are an anomaly, right? The amount of energy that they can take, it's, there's so much there and they can't quite fully explain like why they fire the way that they do. And so I actually said a cool movie would be that AI has to it's a zombie AI movie where it has to eat human brains in order to power itself, kind of thing. So anyway, but I like that theory that it can never get to that level, because he said it will always need a creative mind, and it can never truly be a creative mind. It has to do its research. It can't make something up. So I was like, okay, that's a cool theory, right? Because even though AI can, search the internet, when I say I want to hear a story about how Venom and Carnage fight the Silver Surfer, it scans the internet, it finds out who Venom is, it finds out who Carnage is, finds out who Silver Surfer is, and all their characteristics, everything. And it tells me a story. And you know what? The reason why I started doing them is because I can make up my own stories. But when I tell them to do it, I'm actually entertained too, because there's some twists that it gives me there, right? And some of them are predictable, stuff like that, but it's pretty good, right? But in the end, it needed my creativity, and I have to ask for more, I have to expand it and all that stuff. So it's like, I don't know. I think it'll always need a creative mind, but big fan of Meta AI because I think it's fun.
Yeah. I think it's cool too. It helps us out.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, so back to you in space.
Back to
right?
space.
Back to what you're an expert in, right? We had the AI expert
That's
on
true.
there, so we'll try.
Yeah, I don't know anything about neurology, and I don't really know anything about AI, except I think it's a pretty good proofreader.
Yeah.
So I
proofreader.
tested it to see if it would be a competitor to me, because I make a living as an author primarily. I write stargazing guidebooks, and so I tried AI. I'm like, hey, can you come up with a list of targets to see tonight in the night sky? And I asked it 1,000 different ways, and I could not get it to come up with a good list of things to see.
That surprises me.
That met my criteria.
Okay.
And I would give it criteria. I'm like, hey, no Messier items, no planets, whatever. And it could not do it.
Yeah, I'm
And
sure
maybe it's because I was just using ChatGPT 3.5 instead of 4. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that gave me confidence that at least I'll still have a job for the next little while.
6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
But what's some of the newest things that you've discovered? I know you're constantly excited about what's going
What's
on out
the
there.
newest thing in space?
What's one of the new, what are you? I'd say obsessing about these days.
Oh my God. I'm just trying to pass my class. So I'm at Johns Hopkins doing space systems engineering. So I'm doing spacecraft design all the time.
Says.
It does.
Cool.
And so currently, it's funny. I'm taking a course called electro-optics, which should really just be called cameras and lenses. But no, it's called electro-optics. And what's really blowing my mind right now, and I think that's important. I learn something every week that completely blows my mind. And sometimes it's historical, and sometimes it's forward-looking. And so one of the historical things, for example, like the spy satellites that the Americans used, like if they wanted to spy on Russia during the Cold War. This is in the 60s.
Yeah.
They would literally launch a spacecraft with a telescope the size of Hubble. And on that spacecraft, it would have like 300 kilometers of film. Whoa. They would fly over Russia, take their pictures. The capsule full of that film would eject out of the spacecraft. It would re-enter in like New Mexico or something. They would fly over New Mexico in a cargo plane with a hook, catch the parachute, get it in, get it back to like the Air Force headquarters or whatever, develop the film, blow up the pictures under like 8 feet sheets of paper, and then use like a microscope to go and look at the images or magnifying glass and then look at what the Russians were doing.
And this is the 60s.
This is how they did it because they didn't have digital cameras.
Right.
And then the first digital camera blows my mind. And they use this on deep space missions, like how simple it was. The entire camera, get this, the entire camera was just 4 fiber optic cables.
Oh,
that's it.
crazy.
And basically what you would do is you would have one for, it's called panoptic. So it would be all wavelengths of light. Then you have a red, green, and blue. Mm-hmm. And so that's 4 fiber optic cables only let in those colors of light, and then one for every color of light. And so there's like 1 pixel or 1 little bit of color information. And then what would happen is as the satellite would go, you sweep out lines. And so these 4 LEDs, what you do is you'd use a mirror, or the LEDs, they would rock back and forth. Mm-hmm. And then the spacecraft would move forward. So you're effectively scanning the Earth, or scanning. In this case, the example I was thinking of was the first mission to Mars.
Yeah.
And it would basically just count the number of light photons that would go into each of these fiber optic cables. That was the extent of the complexity in the camera at the time. And then so basically what you would have, what the spacecraft the spacecraft would send back to Earth would just be a list of numbers in a box. And the numbers would come in one at a time. Basically, how many photons went into each of these cables. And there's a number from like 1 to 256, like computer numbers, right? And then what they would do is they would have a big, in the case of the Mars mission, they had a big whiteboard and colored pencils. And they would go on the whiteboard and it had all the numbers, and they would color it in on the number that they got back. And then you would go as the spacecraft was delivering its numbers. All right, this cell is
power of pixel art.
It's blue, and it's got a value of 180. You'd fill it in, and then so they'd go with their colored pencils and they'd go and fill in all the numbers. Remember, this is the 60s, and digital cameras weren't invented. All they had were a mirror that rocked back and forth, a spacecraft going forward.
But that was the digital camera.
And
of the
then
time.
when you stood back at the back of the room and looked at the wall with all your colored pencils, there was the image.
Amazing.
And that's how the first camera worked.
That's so cool.
Hilariously. And here's what blew my mind. I was looking at how the latest Google Earth camera works on the modern spacecraft. They're getting 30 centimeter resolution. The new one's actually getting 15 centimeter resolution on Earth, which is pretty crazy. But currently, it's a spacecraft called Worldview 3, and that's where most of the Google Earth images come from. But the hilarious thing to me is that it almost does exactly the same thing. Instead of a normal camera, like when we take a picture on a camera, it basically projects an image. The image physically shows up at the back of the camera, and then it gets sort of embedded into your chip, CMOS or CCD, whichever technology you're using. But in the spacecraft, it basically literally just has a row of pixels. Mm-hmm. And then as the spacecraft moves over the Earth, it scans it just like your scanner in your computer. And so
makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's like rocking my mind. And so crazy. You have in the Worldview 3 it's 35,000 pixels wide. And that's what it is. And then you have another one for if you're looking at infrared, and the infrared photons are fatter, they're wider. And so you only have 9,000 pixels for detecting infrared light. And the other thing that blew my mind this week, so I'm just going through things that I think are crazy.
Sure. Is
that I think it was the US government made it illegal in infrared light to see anything smaller than 7 meters or 7.5 meters in size for whatever reason. National security. I don't know. Anyway, so what they were doing, but the spacecraft.
Sorry, why would you think they do that?
I have no idea. Anyway.
So they below 7 meters in size.
So 7 meters. So
this is from space.
21 feet. Yeah. So an altitude of 700 kilometers with these spacecraft orbit at. Because they photograph the entire Earth every day.
Now, what could they possibly be concerned about?
I don't know. And so they were only allowing 7 meters. And so these companies, the spacecraft, the telescope resolution is actually in infrared. So this is, you can see stuff at night, like people walking around and stuff, is actually 3 meters. It gives them 3 meters. So the government was coming in and downsampling the images to make the resolution lower so that they could obey the law. And so I'm reading these papers this week, and they're talking about the companies fighting back and finally being able to have the government release it and allow them to have higher definition images in the infrared.
It was photo bombing aliens.
And so I thought that was super interesting.
It must be highly concerned of people being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But like, how could you couldn't take an infrared image and pin it to a person, could you?
No, you're talking about, at that point, you're probably talking vehicles. Anything that's large and makes heat.
Right. But like, why America would care about that?
I don't know.
Images.
That's what I'm wondering.
Because they have vehicles where they shouldn't.
Yeah.
No, I think there's the rule too with 30 centimeters is a rule for the public. So anything under 30 centimeters, so that would be like a face or a license plate or something. That's a no-no. So you're not supposed to take pictures of space that are more fine detail than that. Now they're allowing 15 centimeters going forward in cities.
Okay, so what about like the James Webb? Like that thing takes insanely detailed pictures of space.
Yeah, but it never points at Earth. So James Webb is nowhere. James Webb is 1 million kilometers away. It's, it's at Lagrange point. It's the stable orbit on the other side of the moon.
Yeah.
On the other side of the moon's orbit, sorry. And so it's 1 million kilometers away, and it can't point. If it points at the Earth, it'd be pointing at the sun, and that would just burn up.
Yeah. Gotcha. Because that it takes amazing pictures.
It does, but they're not necessarily. If it turned around and hypothetically pointed at Earth, it wouldn't have very good resolution at all. Like each pixel would be
if you bring something too close to your eyes, it'd be
the opposite. Right? Each pixel would be like a kilometer in size, just because it's so far away.
Okay.
Yeah.
And with the James Webb, it's like pretty much. Am I right to say like as it fields depth or whatever, it's kind of colorizing it? Is that how we see those beautiful, colorful images?
So James Webb is an infrared telescope.
Right.
And the reason it wants to be sensitive in the infrared is it's looking at stuff that's really far away.
Right.
And as the universe expands, a regular light wave gets stretched out. So it might have once upon a time been a visible light ray that would be detectable through a regular telescope or with our eye. But if it passes through enough space, then it just stretches out. Yeah. And so you want to be sensitive at infrared wavelengths if you're looking at things that are in, several billion light years away.
Okay.
Yeah. But Hubble is visible as well. So what you'll do, all cameras are black and white cameras. All cameras, even the one on your phone. And then they have filters on each pixel that decide whether to let in a red, green, or blue photon. Mm-hmm. And so the space telescopes are the same way. But you can get higher detail if you only take a black and white image, or you only take an infrared image, and then if it's something the human eye can't see, like we can't see in the infrared, but all the light coming from deep space is the infrared. And so when we actually expose as a photograph to put on the internet, you're just going to color it purple or something. And so basically
Purple's not a real color.
Purple's not a real color. And so that's what they'll do. And so they have assigned every wavelength of light a specific color. And so like UV would have a color, and and they're usually assigned by the element that is emitting that light. So it would be like oxygen 3, and that would have a specific color. Hydrogen alpha has a specific color, and it would be related to whatever filter they're putting on the telescope at the time or whatnot. But yeah, so that's how they make those images. It's called representative color. Some people call it false color, but that I find that term doesn't really make any sense. Super cameras, very cool.
Yeah.
So your whole life is cameras right now.
My whole life is electro-optical systems. So my current assignment, and it's literally just for a grad school course, despite me having to write letters to the U.S. military and try and get the specs on their telescopes, is just to design an electro-optic system. So like a worldview Google Earth style telescope to take photos of the Earth. And the requirement is it has to be 30 centimeters resolution and revisit every place on Earth once per day. So basically it's stuff that's already been done. And so we're just, for the purpose of this course, just recreating it. Yeah. So a fun little
Interesting.
project.
Still really
So
cool.
if
yeah.
you want to have your wedding on the moon, John will be your photographer.
I can be your photographer. Yeah, there's actually a telescope that's being created in Chile. I forget the name of it. It's like called, usually they have the names like ultra super duper giant telescope.
Isn't there a telescope? Yeah, like is it in the mountains there or something?
Yeah,
It's
so
like
they've got a
huge.
whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
Like the extremely large telescope is one example, and that's
Great at naming
ELT,
things.
great at naming them. Yeah. So there's one that actually its mirror is going to be large enough that it can see detail, like it could see something as small as a car on the moon. Not that you'd necessarily want
really?
to, and it would just be like 1 pixel. And I'm not sure they'll ever point it at the moon, but like in a hypothetical situation, you actually have a telescope that big. It's for the price of $10 billion.
Yeah. So are you building a spacecraft as well? You're helping build a spacecraft?
Oh yeah. So during the capstone project for just grad school, so we did a small sat where we actually went to Johns Hopkins University. We were on campus with my team, and we put it together out of a kit.
amazing.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Basically, the goal wasn't necessarily to build the spacecraft for the program. The goal was to develop an integration test program.
Okay.
But using the spacecraft is sort of our tool du jour. But that was a lot of fun. So there's pictures on my Learn to Stargaze Instagram of me holding this spacecraft because it was pretty small. 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters was the size of the.
It's a
yeah,
small
it was
spacecraft.
So it's
Sent a few crickets to space.
it was
or
called
something.
IASat.
Yeah.
And so it was a training module developed by the U.S. military for training their space systems engineers. So IAS is a baby eagle,
Cool.
or baby falcon, I forget which.
Okay.
And so that's what the spacecraft was named after.
So you launched this thing into space.
No, we just
okay.
we just constructed it.
Okay.
He made a model.
Yeah, it was a model,
right?
and it functioned. So you would hang it from a string.
I did the same thing when I was 10. This is
Yeah,
this
and
is
you
I made a car once.
you could do what's called safing the spacecraft.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so you'd point a light at it, and it would come to the light.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the fun
No,
stuff like
that's
that.
still cool though. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's really,
that's super
really cool.
cool.
I'm just teasing.
And of course, most of my classmates are actually working on, the deep space mission. So most of my classmates work for the Applied Physics Laboratory, and for this particular class, a lot of people were at Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and they were very sad because a lot of their coworkers got laid off because they submitted a budget for the Mars sample return mission, and that's where they wanted to get back 30 vials of Martian soil by 2040, and the budget came in at $11 billion for the mission. And when they submitted the budget, the powers that be basically said no, and please eliminate 20% of your workforce or something.
Okay. Yeah.
And as
Yeah.
sort of a consequence, and then get the budget down to a reasonable price of $4 billion. $4 or $5 billion. Yeah. So compare that to like the United States. I think it was today or yesterday proposed a new ICBM program at $140 billion for missiles. And so you can sort of compare like this is not even really a NASA mission. Well, I guess it's a NASA funded mission.
Yeah,
but
but
built
they're getting
it.
peanuts in comparison at the end
So
of
if you
the
compare
day.
the two missions,
Right.
a 20-year Mars sample return mission for $4 billion versus the your ICBM program for the military that came out around the same time, and you can see the compare and contrast between the two budgets there.
Yeah.
4 versus 140 billion.
Is Space Force getting off the ground in the United States? Like is
No, my understanding. So Space
You
Force used
mentioned
to
it
be,
earlier,
it used to
I
be a
just thought
division
about it,
of the Air Force.
right?
That was a Donald Trump creation.
Yeah, so he just officially broke it apart from the Air Force.
Yeah.
But they've always been bigger than NASA. And so primarily they launch out of Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is just north of Santa Barbara in California. And they launch quite a bit of hardware into space. Their budgets are bigger than NASA's, and pound per pound, they're probably launching a lot more stuff. And most of it is spy satellites that are absolutely massive machines.
Wow.
I can tell you the TV show was funny with Steve Carell.
Yeah, I
Steve
never
Carell,
watched it.
yeah.
I came and went. It got really bad reviews. I never bothered.
Yeah, you know what? It had its moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, it had its
I
moments.
love Steve Carell, but
That's the thing. I
just
like
missed
Steve
it,
Carell.
yeah.
Steve, anything those were the moments. Those were the moments when Steve Carell was on screen.
So when are you done this school, like this current program? When is that all wrapping up soon?
Yeah, so hopefully I'll graduate. I've done all my core courses. I've done my capstone project.
Yeah.
I just have, after this course, 3 electives. And so I plan to graduate in May of next year. Yeah.
When are you going to stop being a student?
I think that's it for me.
Oh, really? I was hoping you'd say never and something intellectual.
That's cliche
Yeah.
nonsense.
Yeah, I'll probably never be unless I get an honorary. I'll probably never be a Dr. Reed.
Right.
But I really need to focus on getting the telescopes set up and the observatories set up in here on Prospect Road there near Peggy's Cove.
Yeah, man.
that's
I love
my
that program.
project.
I think it's an awesome idea, and we totally support it. And please let us know. We want to, if we can share progress on it on the Pint page. I mean, we know we got a great page going with a lot of followers.
I think the biggest milestone will be getting the telescope moved over.
Right.
And so we need the city to approve the building permit.
Yeah.
And then getting the actual device moved over with the rotating dome and everything. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be really exciting.
Coming up here, you can put some pressure on.
There you go. It's a good
right.
time. Yeah.
It's a good time to put some pressure.
And then just getting that development agreement approved so that we have permission to run a business on the property. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. John, I realize our battery's getting low, and maybe it'd be a good time to wrap up. We've almost had an hour, so.
Yeah.
Geez, man, this was
go
great.
by quick.
It goes by so fast. Yeah. It just, so round 3 is welcomed.
Absolutely.
Telescope launch. Maybe that will be on video. Maybe we'll come down and check the place out.
Oh, we could do one live. Yeah.
Yeah, we can.
Afternoon
We can
pints in an observatory.
yeah, we plan on getting the show in a video real soon. So that would be a fun expedition.
Sure would.
Yeah, man. But once again, thank you so much and cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers.